It's going.
So I got a note. It says meeting is now live stream on YouTube.
It does say that? Okay, great.
It
Well, let's go
does.
with it. Oh, good. Okay, well, hey there, Hillary. It's so great to be with you on the
Hi.
Confident Sober Women podcast. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity to share your story in whatever way you'd like to with the audience, and then we're going to talk about it.
Right. Yeah, so I'm Hillary Phelps. I'm 16 years sober. And I walked into a treatment center 16 years ago because I felt broken and shameful and scared and lonely and fearful. And I felt broken in every way. And I'd gotten there because I used drugs and alcohol to try to escape the way I felt on any given day. I didn't like who I was. And it started, I think, I've shared this, in sixth grade. Um, I never felt, I had someone say, well, there were two moments. One said, I was the fastest swimmer in the country and in my age group in the distance events. And I was a straight A student. And someone said, well, if you study harder and trained harder, you would be faster and you'd be better. And in my brain, I was like, well, I'm not good enough the way I am. Like, I'm already the best. I'm doing and I'm not, that's not good enough. And so that kind of perpetuated into, you're not funny enough or smart enough or pretty enough or you're just not enough in any way. So when I found alcohol at 14, I was like that relief I was looking for. I didn't know that I wanted it, but I wanted to be part of the cool kids, and I wanted to be accepted. And so, as a swimmer, which was a really niche sport in Baltimore, it's not lacrosse, it's not soccer, and so um, I started to dabble there, and it made me feel a part of. And I drank wine. I didn't like the taste of beer. We would drink cheap beer, and my friend and I would do Hey Mister outside of the liquor stores in Towson with, Towson University. It was in Towson State. And we'd ask for Boone's Farm. It was really sweet and it didn't taste bad. And we could split a half bottle and we could just, kind of forget. And ironically, both of us are now in recovery. She was the one I reached out to when I was looking for help because on MySpace. Like, do you remember the original social media MySpace platform? So on MySpace, you can put, do you drink or do you smoke? And she put no to both of them. And I remember thinking, I've done both of those with you. Yeah. I was like, wait a second. So I reached out to her and I was like, well, what do you mean you don't? And I had kind of started to think that my drinking was a problem. And she was like, oh, I got sober 5 years ago. I don't drink anymore. And it's like, how did you do it? I'm like, I don't understand. And she goes, why don't you try going the weekend without drinking? And I'm like, are you and I literally wrote back, well, what do you do then? Because I had no idea or concept of what I was going to do if it didn't involve alcohol on the weekend. Because like, what do you do?
Right.
And you know, I drank wine. So my choice was wine, champagne. If I was out, I thought like martinis or scotch because they were fancy drinks, and I thought you couldn't be an addict or an alcoholic if you were drinking wine because it's just wine. I'm not drinking out of a brown paper bag. I'm not drinking before work. I'm not doing all of these things that I thought, especially at the time, was how addicts and alcoholics were depicted in the media, like Meg Ryan drinking out of the brown paper bag of vodka or sneaking it, or Nicolas Cage and leaving Las Vegas. Like those are the ideas of alcoholics that I had. Why would you sneak it? My son said, why would you sneak it? So those are the ideas that the things that I had in mind when it came to addicts and alcoholics, is that's how they looked. And so I didn't think that anybody, I blacked out every time I put alcohol in my body. I would fall down, I would get bruises. I wouldn't know what happened the night before. I wouldn't know, I'd wake up and not remember how I got there. And and it just started, not even feel scary, but other people started to notice. And that's what, because if it were just me, I probably would have kept going down that path. But it was other people in my life that were saying, like, this isn't good. Like, this isn't healthy. We're concerned about you. This isn't you. And that, someone said, every time you put alcohol in your body, I never know who's going to show up. You could be the fun one that night, or you could be the sad one, and you could be super sappy and making friends everywhere and like be crying, or you could be angry and you could want to fight girls in the bathroom because they looked at you funny or because and you just never knew. Right. And it was like, and I was like, yeah, but that's kind of exciting. And they were like, it's not fun. That's not who it's not. And they said, like, we get these little glimmers of who you really are when you're not drinking. And it's this beautiful person and kind and loving and sweet and thoughtful. but then you put alcohol in your body and you just become a different person. And I didn't see that. Um, and I don't know that I fully understood that until I got sober and started doing more work to like to tap into my soul, to get a spiritual program, to live a life of um like doing, you know, esteemable actions, like all of those things. It took me a while to really understand, like look back and say, oh yeah, now I remember. But it was always wine, you know, and or that was my choice. I would drink or do whatever you put in front of me, but I, you know, that was that's what I went to, and I just didn't, you know, I would do things like buy a case of wine. I was like, well, I'm going to give these out as Christmas presents to people, and then I would end up drinking all of them, and then I'm like, well, I don't want my wine shelf to be empty, so I would put empty bottles backwards in the wine case, so if anybody came over, it looked like there was like a full case of wine. Like just those things, you know, just that way of thinking, like, well, what other people think of me is really important, but I want to do the things I want to do, like drink all the time. And so I'm going to find ways to trick people or to do it, you know, do it sneakily and do it in the kitchen, like do all those things so I can protect my addiction and my drink at every turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally understand. It's interesting how similar our stories are, minus the competitive swimming and straight A's. But I was also an athlete I was kind of raised as an athlete as well. In my family, that's how we were. But and my kids were swimmers, so I'm familiar with
Nice.
that world and what that's like here in Baltimore, at least up to the high school level. But I struggled with those same isms, those not enough isms that you described, all of them. I was the girl that was never pretty enough, smart enough, thin enough for whatever group I was in. And
Yeah.
you're right, those just take over and make you it's like you are in this bubble of not enoughism, like all around you all the time, no matter what anyone says. I mean, people would say, like, I'm sure you were the fastest swimmer in the world, in the country, or the world. Which one?
Country.
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 And your age group and stuff. So I'm sure people were constantly saying, oh my God, you're so amazing, or this or that. And like you're hearing that a lot, but none of that can come in when we have that bubble around us of the not enoughisms, right? Like, I don't know if you can relate to that, but like I couldn't hear any of
Yeah.
it. Um,
And I think we focus on the negative. I focus on the negative things. If I get 5 kind compliments and one
right.
criticism or that's not complimentary or whatever, I will stick to this one. Like I will be like, okay, it doesn't matter all the nice things people say. I'm going to focus on that negative thing and I'm going to hold on to that. I'm going to be like, well, do you remember? And people are like, yeah, but 5 other people gave you this compliment. Why? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. That nope. If I'm not pleasing everybody, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
That's not really a realistic way to live, right? Because
Right.
you're never going to please everybody.
Well, not only that, but not everybody is for us, right? And so we're
Yes,
not
I'm finding
everybody's
that
gonna
out.
like us,
Yeah,
but it's not like a Hillary, I don't like you. It's more just like you're not for me. You know, we don't have the same interests, we don't have the same passions or personality types. So there's a lot of ways that people just aren't compatible. I guess that's a better way to say it. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us. It just means that we're not compatible. And but they're very
right,
compatible with someone else, you know, and that's fine. But so I think we internalize this as being there's something wrong with me. They don't like me, and or I'm not good enough. When really it's probably just you're not compatible. But we can't in that phase we can't see any of that. I also was a blackout drinker as well. I thought that was sort of normal. I thought everybody who
hmm
drank experienced that. I came to find out
same.
much later, not everybody drinks. I didn't understand that. And also people don't always black out, and that's actually not like at all normal.
Yeah,
But to me it was. I was like, well, this is just what happens for me. Um,
yeah.
so
You know
I'm
what I think? I want to go like what you were saying about like and that's the thing. So I'm, you know, I'm 45, and I think in the last year or two is when I finally accepted that like there's like a meme, you know, it's like you could be the sweetest peach in the world, but there's going to be someone that doesn't like peaches. You know, and like that, like, and being okay with who I am, and like it's okay. But and then I think the like struggle comes because instead of saying, you know, people like, okay, well, you're just not for me and we're just not compatible in whatever, you know, a friendship or work relationship or whatever that is, and being okay with it, I think people then try to be better than that. You know what I mean? Like instead of being like, we're all the same, we're just different, like, but we're on the same, that's when people try to tear people down, like, well, I don't like your beliefs, or I don't like that you like to wear the color orange. Like,
Right.
that's stupid. That looks, and that's where I think there's so much division right now in the world, like people just not accepting others for who they are and being okay with the fact that they're different, or like, we're just not compatible, we're just not,
Right.
and that's okay.
Well,
And
then we
then move
layer on
on if
other
they look
things.
for that.
Yeah, I totally agree
Yeah.
with you 100%. And I actually I'm thankful that I started to come to this. I mean, through lots of like really great therapy and EMDR work and recovery work for a
Mm,
lot of years. I'm just a couple of years older than you. Through all of that, I think I started to come have an awakening, probably multiple time, the multiple time I've had this in my whatever years of sobriety. At that time, when I was close to getting 40, I was, around that time, and I was raising my
yeah.
kids. I have 3 children, they're older teens now, but we would go to the gym every day. Like that's how I survived. I went to the gym, they went to the nursery, I worked out. They went to preschool there. We like lived there. I talk about this in my memoir. I wrote a memoir last year, and I share this story because I think so many women that I was in community with there, and that are probably there right now, were experiencing this, but no one ever talked about it. And I just remember
Mhm.
trying so hard to like fit in with these women. They were like the beautiful people. They were coming in with the lipstick. All their kids were perfect and clean and not crying and all the things. And I'm coming in crying with my kids out of control. And I'm like, why? I'm just trying to get here on time. And I just wanted to fit with
Yeah.
these women so bad. And they just didn't really want me. And I couldn't get it.
Isn't
I'm
it
like, what is it? I was
Yeah.
like, is it because I don't drink? I used to think that. And then I was like, that's probably not
Mm.
it. And I'm like, am I not wearing the right clothes? Like, am I too much? Like I went through all of that to get to the point
Mhm.
where I finally was like a lot of self-acceptance, a lot of realization around like, I'm actually fine as I am. Like, this is how God made me. I'm perfectly comfortable in my own skin
Mhm.
today. I'm a good person. I take care of my children. you know, um,
Yeah.
but they just didn't want to. I just didn't fit into that group. And it was like a round peg in a square hole, trying for years to push that in. And when I finally had an
Mhm.
epiphany of like, they're just not for me, and it's not that
Mhm.
they're bad women. They're not evil or mean. I
Yeah.
mean, they could be mean sometimes, but they just have their own friends, you know?
Yeah.
And I needed to work on finding my own people, which was, I'm sure you probably experienced, it's painful a little
Yeah.
bit, but it's
Yeah.
also freeing.
Because it is. And I think we shrink ourselves to fit into spaces we no longer belong. You know what I mean? And like when I was drinking, I would shrink myself all the time to fit into a space I thought I wanted to be in. Right. So whether that was the cool girls or the ones that wear,
Right.
designer clothing or drive, nicer cars or whatever that is, what I thought, would make me feel better or cooler. And I was just shrinking myself and who I was to fit into spaces I didn't
Right.
belong or that weren't for me. And yeah, I love that square peg round hole. I did that for a long time. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll be whoever it is, so I can fit in with you or so you like me. But I realize it's like chipping off pieces of our soul every time we do that. It's losing little bits of ourselves.
But what's so
Yeah.
great about when we do realize that this is what's happening and we come to terms with, and this is a process, I don't believe we ever really arrive. We are continuously working on
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
But when we get to a space where we can really begin to like ourselves. We might not be fully into
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I love myself, but we're starting to like
Right.
ourselves. We're starting to trust ourselves a little more, listening in, tuning into our own, intuition. We get the
Yep.
messages and we're starting to listen to them versus drink it away or push it away. Um, then we are able to create healthier boundaries, right? So then that's when that starts happening. And then even now, like I'm very protective of my time. I'm sure you are too. You're a busy woman, you're traveling, you're doing things, you have a child. I'm very protective of my time too. And my personally right now in my stage of life, I am married, I have these 3 kids, 2 of which are in college, and spending time with them is extremely important to me. And
Yep.
so anything that's going to threaten that is just not going to be welcome in right now. And I'm always
Hmm.
going to choose my family right now over, because I don't know how much longer I'm going to have access to them, pretty easily. They could move away or, just change to jobs they're going to be working in careers and things. So when I have people that come into my life, I feel like I'm always using that discernment to decide whether or not this person is going to be compatible, I guess is a good word, but more like, is this a mutual relationship?
I
Is
love
this
that.
somebody that's a giver and a taker versus am I going to be required to give too
Yeah.
much or have to receive too much? And so anything that looks like that, I have really spent, maybe you have too, like my 40s kind of stripping away anything
Hmm.
that looks like that.
Hmm.
It makes it easier to
But
make decisions now because I'm like, how is this going to be supportive? And sometimes we have
mhm.
to take one for the team. Let's face it. We have to do things we don't like to do sometimes, you
Yeah.
know, but mostly when we have control over certain things, I just evaluate it all the time. Like, is this going to be fulfilling to me? Is this going to bring me joy? And if it's not, I kind of just don't want to.
If it's depleting, it's just, yeah, too much. And it's also like that ebb and flow. Like, sometimes I have this group of women. I call them my board of directors, and they're, five of them, and they're my best friends. And I'm like, I feel like I'm taking a lot now, but I feel like it ebbs and flows
It
based on
does.
what's going on in our life. Sometimes I am a full on taker, and
Yes.
they're full on supportive,
Yes.
and it's incredible. You know what I mean? But then other times I'm just like, oh, yep, I can hold that space for you, and so it's, um,
But that's how it
but I
should be.
love that.
That's healthy
Yeah.
relationships because we're not all the same and we're not all going through the same stuff, or, we all need times where we need more and times when we need less. But that's what I mean. But if you have people in your life that are always one, it's like
Mm,
too much. Do you know what I
hmm.
mean? And I feel like at our
Hmm.
stage of life, we get to decide, how we spend our time and who is going to bring us joy,
And I
and what's
love
going to
the
light us up.
boundaries. The
Yeah.
boundary that you just spoke about, like I'm working with that with someone now, and this person like put down a really firm boundary, and people aren't respecting. And so I'm like, but you put this here, like so I'll just do myself. So when I set a boundary and I say, this is not okay, if I start to let anybody push that back on me, right? That's self-sacrifice. Because they're benefiting from it and I'm now losing, And so when I look at it that way, and Carolyn Mace wrote this incredible book called Anatomy of the Spirit.
Okay.
And it talks about that. Like when we set a goal, nobody else knows. So if I say tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up and I'm going to work out, and that's something I'm doing for myself, and I get up and I don't work out, my son doesn't care, partner doesn't care, my colleagues don't care. It doesn't bother. They don't know, but it takes away a little bit of myself because I'm only letting myself down, right? And the more we do that, whether it's boundaries, promises to ourselves, like I'm not going to drink today, and then doing, you know what I mean, or I'm not going to whatever, I'm going to eat dessert twice. I don't know, whatever it is that we promise ourselves. And then we're the only ones that are getting hurt from that, and then that starts looking like self-sacrifice. And for a really long time, like going back to what you said about drinking, like I self-sacrificed myself, my beliefs, my morals, my values, my voice, like all of that stuff, because I wasn't confident enough to say, right, this is who I am and I'm okay. And if that's not okay with you, then I will attract people to me. You become this magnet of attracting people who are like you to you,
Yeah.
and kind of repelling people that aren't. But you're right, 100%. If it's not that confidence and we haven't found that in ourselves, it's a really hard thing um, to accept.
I think, yeah, it's just a process. It's something that we
To
baby step in.
process.
And then
Yeah,
sometimes we make a mistake. We will mess up. So we might sit
100%.
back and like let someone push that boundary or break it even. And then we get hurt, because there's feelings
Yeah.
attached to that, right? Because if we don't, that's like then not honoring and respecting ourselves. So then the feelings come
Hmm.
in. I mean, I'm talking well into sobriety now, today. I mean, this stuff
Right.
is still happening for us. It's not just about
100%.
quitting drinking, it's happening now. And so if you don't hold a boundary to yourself, then now you've disappointed yourself. And
And that's the
so
only person. Yeah.
that leaves you feeling how shameful,
Depleted.
sad,
Like, right.
disappointed, like a failure, all of these things. And now you're left with managing that. So now you've created a whole mess.
And then as an addict, right, those voices start to create that doubt, right? You're not good enough. Why does it matter? A drink looks really good, right? Like all of those things, just simply, but you know what I mean? And so I
Yes.
think for us, in recovery, it's really important to follow what I say I'm going to do to myself, right? It doesn't, not nobody else, because then, that's how easily it comes back. It's like, this is
Totally.
too much. I can't deal with this.
Well,
I'm a
one thing I hear
failure.
from a
I'm
lot of
worthless.
one thing I hear from a lot of women, and maybe you do too, especially like early on, like after that first year of sobriety, kind of when we're still new, but like you're waking up, right? There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of change, identity shifts. Is this self-trust piece? I don't trust myself to make the right choice, or I don't know how to make this decision. I think I hear this a lot. And one of the exercises that's really good at helping retrain your brain, the neuroscience behind that, is to find things that you can do consistently every single day that lead to the result of trusting yourself. So meaning, for example, the
Yeah.
example I always use is silly, but it's important. Like if you're a snooze button hitter, so the snooze button is extremely bad for your brain because what you've done is you've trained yourself, however long you've done that, that you don't do what you say. when you set your alarm for 6 o'clock, you don't get up at 6 o'clock. So then the day that you say, you know what, I'm going to make a change in my routine and I'm going to start working out in the morning and I'm going to get up at 5:30, your brain goes, no, you're not. Like, you're not going to, you don't do that. You don't do what you say. And so
Uh-huh.
you're going to consistently have a hard time doing that. But if you make the decision to not hit that snooze button anymore, you put your phone in the bathroom, or that's what Mel Robbins always says, like put your phone in the bathroom or whatever you need to do. So you literally have to get up out of the bed and end that experience, and you're not hitting the snooze button. You're gradually over time retraining your brain to know, actually Shelby does do what she says she's going to do. And then
I
that
love
leads into
that.
the bigger stuff, like, oh, now you say you want to be more present for your children, you want, or your child, like, I'm going to be more present with him when I'm with him, and I'm going to give him my attention, I'm going to look at him, smile at him, play games with him. And
Mhm.
if previously you've been overwhelmed or busy or working or distracted in whatever way that you haven't been doing that, your brain is going to take a minute to be like, no, you don't, you're always on your phone when you're with your kid, you're not going to do that. And so
That's right. Yeah.
now when you
Yeah.
make the change and you do it consistently over time with those little bits, you look at him in his face every time, you put your phone down when he walks in the room,
Yeah.
you are present with him while you're reading bedtime stories, then suddenly you retrain it to know, yeah, Hillary, you're doing what you say you're going to do. And that just builds trust for the bigger things. Does
Yeah.
that make
And
sense?
that it's safe,
Yeah.
right? Like, because I think we tell ourselves, like, it's okay. Like, the world's not going to end if I put my phone on the windowsill for 30 minutes and read. Like, it's not going to, right? But we tell
Right.
ourselves, like, do I have to be reachable or have to? It's like,
Well, there's some things about, tell me what you think about this, but sometimes I feel like some of that, and again, these are very small examples, but they can translate
yeah,
into the big ones. It's like a rebellion, right? Well, I don't want to put my phone over there because I'm an adult.
I do.
I want to control that. I want to be able to look at it when I want. You
I
can't
love
tell
that.
me that I can't look at my phone while I'm talking to my kid. You know what I mean? Like, it's like this thing that's innate, I think, inside of us.
It's like
Instead
your
of
angry inner child
right,
coming
it's
out saying, like, yes,
instead
I
of
can.
embracing the fact that you're trying to create peace and serenity in your life and also do this other thing. I don't know, it's very interesting. I think that shows up in other areas too, like
Hmm.
in our work, for example. I know you're working on a lot of things right now. You're a speaker, you have a
Hmm.
blog, you are very active in the recovery community. But say one day, like one week, you're just not yourself, and you're just, and those voices start to tell you, like, well, you can take a nap today for 3 hours, or you can watch that show for a couple hours. Like, who cares that you have this
Yes.
deadline coming up? Like, we get that
Yep.
rebelliousness because for a variety of reasons. Is that relatable?
Yeah. Well, once you do it once too, it's easier, right? If you're like, well, I'm just going to miss this deadline, I'm going to tell them that XYZ, or I'm going to not show up, I'm running late because, you know,
Yeah.
my day got whatever it looks like. Yes. And once you do it once, it's like lying, right? Like when I was drinking, like lying was so easy because it was like you do one thing and then another and it snowballs and it snowballs and it snowballs. Where now, sometimes it's really uncomfortable to tell the truth, but I know, like, for me anyway, in my recovery and for my journey, one little lie is going to get bigger and bigger. And it's like, well, that's just a little one. It was just a little white lie that
You're conscious.
I
Report
ate
back.
ice cream. Like what? I no, I can't. And because repeatedly after 16 years, after doing it for so long, like that was a huge part of my recovery. It was being because it's humility and honesty, right? And authenticity. And it's like, and that goes back to the self-confidence. If you don't like me for who I am, then that's fine. Like, okay, I'm not for you,
Right.
but I know I have other people that I am for, or that love me or that support me. And so it's a process, right? And someone even said that. I'm like, I was not like this at 10 years. And some people are probably a lot faster and get this quicker than I do. So that's not like a thing. But it is a journey, right? And they say like this whole thing is a journey, one step at a time, stay the path, walk the course. And I found that to
Curious
be
about
true.
so one of the phrases that I use when I got sober, after I got sober, I got pregnant when I was 6 months sober, and then I
Oh,
18 months later I had my
wow.
second kid, and then 2 years later I had 3 kids in 4 years, right? So it
Wow.
wasn't a great idea. It turned out fine, but like it was very difficult because I did the sobriety a little backwards. I had to focus on all these babies, right? And then I was like, oh my gosh, now I've been sober for 4 or 5 years or whatever, and I'm like, haven't really done a lot of the work because had this
Yeah.
other thing. And so I had and have had since then. I'm sure you've had like very challenging experiences in life. Whether we lived into the teenage years that were extremely difficult for particularly a couple of my kids that were just really gave us a hard time, and were very, I would say, traumatic and chaotic and just extremely emotional. And so I was left with these periods of time where I was just like overwhelmed and overcome with just big emotions. I mean, just big feelings, and I'm not saying that they're not normal. That's not what I should have been feeling or what other people wouldn't feel in those situations too. But for me, um, there were periods of time in my sobriety where they were very difficult to deal with. And I had what I would call a sober bottom. It was almost like I was at the
Oh
same
yeah.
place I was at the end of my drinking, but without a
Hmm.
drink.
Hmm.
Right. And I don't
Hmm.
know if you are, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but if you have like an experience like that or a time or you can just share like how that's been for you and then how you've kind of worked through that.
I know, laughing because there's so many that I can remember vividly.
Oh,
At
really pick.
18, I know, like I can do like a little bit of a timeline. I mean, at 18 months, I kind of started for me, 12 steps were really important. Like that was a big part of my recovery. And I know everybody's different, but for me, that was really helpful because I found a community in the beginning. I could start living, like life on life's terms. I could kind of find, follow for me, the steps of, turning it over, making amends, prayer and meditation. Like I needed a guide to life when I came in because I had no idea how to live a sober, authentic, vulnerable, kind life. Like I had no idea what I was doing. So at 18 months, I kind of drifted a little bit from that. And I was like, I got this. I know what I'm doing. And it came back and I had a very like an emotional, very emotional. And I remember sitting on the floor in the kitchen, like when I am like, what am I doing? Is this my life now? Like, is this it? Like, I don't know. And I remember thinking, like, I didn't know who I was, didn't know what I liked. I had no clue what I liked to do. And I remember someone asked me, they're like, what do you like? And I'm like, uh, I don't, because I'd stopped drinking and that took up so much of my time. So I had the incredible, I was so fortunate to, I went and I lived in an ashram and I studied yoga. And 2009. So I was about 2 years sober. I just gotten 2 years sober. And that was a gift because that kind of helped me because I always loved yoga. And so I went and I did that. And then at 5 years, I was diagnosed with severe depression. But I took that into the rooms and I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm struggling. Like, I feel like I'm just putting on this happy face where I don't feel good on the inside,
Mhm.
And so I went and I started doing therapy. And, at 10 years, my son was born, which was a beautiful gift. Of all the things in my life, I never knew what I wanted to do, but I always knew I wanted to be a mother. Um, and he's the greatest gift in the universe. And just, it's, I hear what you're saying, he says. And um, at 15 years, I finalized a challenging and painful divorce. Um, I moved, I launched a business because I'd been working with I'd stayed home with Alexander. And my dad died
Oh,
unexpectedly. He didn't wake up. So it's four of the top five things in any person's life. The
oh, wow.
top four of the top five challenges that any person goes through in a lifetime happened
Right,
to me in a year.
right.
And at the end of that, like Shelby, I'm telling you, when I found out about my dad, I was like, I'm done. That's it. I'm drinking. Like I can't. They say God never gives you more than you can handle, and I'm like, I'm. There's only so much breath work and yoga and meditation and meetings and community, and there's only so much I can do. Like this does not feel good, and I
Yes.
wanted to check out so bad, and I went and I've shared this before. And when I lead and in sober spaces, because I think sober like people in recovery get this, and I went and I bought and I'd smoked when I was drinking, and because I was like, I need something. Ice cream's not going to do it. A walk if like I'm so overcome with grief and sadness. And I learned that in early recovery. It's like whatever you do, don't pick up a drink. Nothing else matters. Like if you go smoke cigarettes, if you go skydive, I mean, whatever it is, it's not drinking. So as long as you can stay away from that, and I did. And my mom, like, God bless her, and I laugh when I say this now. She's like, can't you just go have a cappuccino? Like, wouldn't that help? And I'm like, I wake up with a cappuccino.
I love you, Mom.
I love my mom too. She's so
Love
funny. And I
you.
was like, she's so sweet. And I was like, because this is what I want to do. And I'd never spoken this openly and freely to her before about like recovery. And because I
Yeah.
don't know that people who aren't in it understand it. But when I share this with a group of people in recovery, they're like, oh yeah, I get that. I was like, I want to go down to like a dive bar. not a nice restaurant,
Right.
a dive bar. I want to make a new friend, hang out there, talk to them, smoke cigarettes, drink a ton, maybe do some like, and not come back for a week.
Right.
That's what I want to do. And she goes, "Oh, smoking sounds like a great idea."
You're
you
fine.
know,
Yeah.
she's like, "You stick with that until I quit." I stopped and, I
Yeah.
quit 10 days later and it was like,
Yeah.
but in the moment, that was what I needed. And so, yes, those big emotions are so hard because we want to escape. I want to escape them. I don't want to feel them. But what sobriety does is like allows me to show up for life on life's terms, right? Like, meaning I can handle those things because I've gone through enough of them over the last 16 years to know that I can get through them.
Right.
Because that was all, it's a practice, like the first time I had a craving, I was like, gosh, I just want to drink so bad. And I, waited till midnight because I've heard that if you just wait till midnight, it's another day. So just hang on. And then I was asleep and the next morning I woke up and I was fine. I was like, oh, I did it once, I can do it again. And so for me, it was building, like we talked about, that trust muscle of knowing that I can get through anything that life throws at me without a drink, or wanting to change the way I feel. And that's hard, but it's just
So
a
true.
practice. Yeah,
It does take a lot of practice, and it doesn't
it
end. This is the
does.
problem, right? Because then
Mm,
you were 15 years sober when all of that stuff happened to you. So it doesn't matter if you're 15 or 25 or 45 years sober, you're still a human being doing
yeah.
human things and having these big emotions that feel like you're going to die. Like you can't ever get out of it. And it's very, very painful. But one of the things that's so important that I think we just don't do in active addiction, and a lot of it is we're not taught, like maybe it's how we were raised. I don't want to point the finger. There's a variety of reasons why maybe we don't know how to identify feelings or we don't know how to feel them, but we didn't do it during active addiction for sure. and
Mhm.
and so we don't know how to even just acknowledge it, just how to say like, yeah, I have so much sadness right now. There's so much sadness coming up for me. I can feel it. It's here. Just like naming it and like knowing it's there is like kind of half the battle. And
Mhm.
yes, like last week I had a very emotional week for really who knows what reason. I'm not even sure. And I don't know, I was overwhelmed. Who knows why, hormones, I don't know. And
Yeah.
I had like a literal breakdown in my office. I'm in my office. I had just finished with my clients. I could feel it kind of coming. And then I just broke down and like started sobbing. And I'm like, okay, like what is wrong with you? But I'm like, you know what? I just allowed it. I just allowed it. I just allowed
I,
it to be there. And I'm not, I'm by myself. I don't have any more clients. There's no one here. Just allow whatever to happen. And don't try to explain it. Don't try to, because you know how we do. We're like, well, why is this happening? I had my food today. I've had my exercise. I got good sleep. We go through all the reasons why this shouldn't be happening right now, but it
yeah.
was happening. And so instead of trying to fight it, I mean, we can do all that stuff later. You can kind of circle back, right? And kind of come back and be like, well, gee, why do we think that happened? And you can assess it then. But like in those moments, just saying, like, I'm a human being, I have real emotions. This is the one that's showing up right now, and I'm going to allow it. Um,
Yeah. I work with this beautiful couple in San Diego, and he says it's a and he says to me, he's like, it's not good or bad. It just is.
right.
Right. And so when we try to name it, and I say that to my son too, and so when we're working together, and I would cry, put my hands, and he's like, no. And he'd take my hands away. He's like, this is shame. Be
Yes.
proud. Crying's not shameful. And I'm like, oh,
Yes.
so now when I cry, I just allow it. I just let it come. And so I say to my son too, because he's like, why am I crying? I don't want to. And I was like, crying is the same emotion. It's the same thing as laughter. It's a release of emotion. And I said to him, and he's like, well, I don't want to cry. And I'm like, anything that we push down or repress or ignore, it's going to show up somatically somewhere in the body. We're going to have a tummy ache. And he was like, sometimes I get tummy aches when and I'm like, exactly. So it's not good or bad. It just is. And I read recently, and I just posted that it's like feelings last for 60 to 90 seconds, but
Hmm.
it's the story we tell ourselves about those feelings that keeps us caught in the loop.
Yes.
This person did this to me and I'm really upset about it. Okay, feel the feeling, let it go. But then we're like, well, why did they do it? They must be this, or they're this, or I'm going to get vengeance, or you know what I mean? We start doing it and we get ourselves all wrapped up and go right back in. It's
We
like,
do.
I'm just going to let it go, which is also practice. I'm not
Takes
perfect at
time.
that. I am not do it all the time. Like, I definitely want to,
But I
I
do think
message my,
I've noticed in my life it gets better. Like as you do it, like that experience that I just shared. I mean, it was okay. Like I was not
yeah,
comfortable, but I also wasn't really that. I mean, it was okay, which was way better than it would have been. Maybe a couple years ago. So it does get better. So
Mhm.
I want to get real, I'm sure we could swap stories and continue down that path because it's such a big topic. And I know all of the women who are listening really can relate and want to hear more of
Yeah.
that realness, right? About our lives. But let's get real practical just for a couple minutes before we have to close out on like some really
Yeah.
solid tools and tips and tricks that you use or we both use maybe that help when those things happen, like when we're overcome with anxiety or overwhelm or sadness or grief, like what do you do?
So I do a couple of things depending on what it is. Sometimes in order, like we talked about this, getting back to our feminine voice, like hearing our intuition, like what is it that I need? And so because if I sit here and I'm like, what do I need? I'm like, "Ugh, I just need to go this. I just need to, like, I'm using my brain, right? So, but what I've done is if I'm like, what do I need? I will sit with my feet on the floor and my hands on my lap. I close my eyes. It's quiet. Like I'm not, make sure I don't have distractions. And I just sit there and I say, what do you need? What do you need? And I'll say it. What do you need? Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I'm like, I just really need to call a friend. Like what, because it's my heart. I'm speaking to my soul. I'm not using my brain to tell me, oh, I should send that email, or oh, I should just take a nap, or oh, I should take a bath, whatever. Sometimes I just want to take a bath and just sit in like water. Like that will come through too. Sometimes it's really quick and sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but that's something that's really helpful to me about like what does my soul need? Like what does my human,
Mhm.
like my not my human, but like my soul. Sometimes it just move. I also love jumping jacks or just dancing, like somatic, like shaking, right? Like getting that. And I am not, I don't do it in front of people. I will do it in front of my son, but I feel like I look like it. I don't look cute, but it feels good to get, it's like stuck energy. It's like moving that stuck energy out. Okay, I'll meet you in 1 second. Like getting that stuck energy out feels really good, right? Because that's what emotions are. Like we push them down, they get stuck somewhere in our body. So just being able to like shake it out, jump it out, move it out. Um, and then I also love singing, like, or just talking, because like it activates that throat chakra. So if I've been silent for a long time or not speaking my voice or speaking my truth, I will get in the car and I will sing, that song Unstoppable
Yes.
by Sia, is that her name? I'm unstoppable. And just sing it, right? Because our voice and our the words that we
Yes.
say or the words we think become our reality. Like that's what we see. You know what I mean? Like if you say, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this too. It's like if we start thinking everybody's out to get us and
Yes.
all this bad stuff is happening, like we'll continue to see the bad stuff. But if we look at the good stuff and say like that's my gratitude. So gratitude lists are really important for me too. I do it with my son every night before we go to bed. So it's the last thing we think about before we like fall into that subconscious and then fall deep into sleep. So we wake up the next morning, like, if we're grateful for our friends and I hit a ball in baseball and, whatever that is, then you fall asleep in that space of gratitude and wake up in the same way versus stewing about problems or worrying about what what I have to do tomorrow. So those are some of the things that have helped me and they're super simple. I
Love that.
also like there's one more Bob Proctor talks about this and he says and change your paradigm, change your life. I don't know if you've read that or heard of it.
I have it.
It's the best.
Okay.
um I've listened to it 10 times on Audible, but he talks about writing in the present tense. So like if I'm stuck in a situation, can you hear him? He's calling us like I'm on 5%. If you're stuck in a situation, thank you for the grace of allowing him to be here today with a um if I'm stuck in a situation like, oh my gosh, this is so bad, this is so, it's like, where do I want to be? Right. And so when I was going through my divorce, I would write, and when I'm in this tough spot, like I'm joyful and at peace now that I'm happy and free now that. And so I write whatever it is that I want to get on. So that space I
Yes.
want to be in, I'm happy and free now that I have a space of my own. I'm happy and free, now that I have autonomy over my life. I'm happy, like whatever that is. And that's also helpful because it gets you also in that space of feeling good versus stuck in the challenge.
I mean, and everything you're talking about really sounds like just good old fashioned energy work too. You know, like when we all have our energy fields and we're like shifting that energy for the better or getting rid of the negative, unplugging, clearing out our chakras, things like that. I mean, all of that is essential truly for this next level of emotional sobriety, from taking your life from good to really elevating to thriving beyond recovery,
Yeah.
because if you just
because I
stay
couldn't do
stagnant,
that
yeah,
without getting sober. Yeah.
right. But if we also just stay stagnant, I mean, okay, cool, cool, we're sober. But like if we do nothing else, we're not going to be very joyful. So it takes all of that stuff to be able to manage those emotions, to be able to show up for our people, to have healthy boundaries, to protect our hearts and our time and our finances,
Yeah.
in order to live well and have an amazing life beyond that initial phase of recovery.
Yeah.
So
And so people are like, it's a lot of work. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm okay with a lot of work because I spent a lot of time drinking and recovering and hungover and all that
that's
stuff when I
right.
was drinking. So this is a better, so
Well, that's right. But also, what's the alternative?
he's in the bathroom. I'm so
I
sorry.
mean, you know what? I mean, like, what's the alternative? So, I mean, we can choose to just sit in our own mess, and or we can choose to be in the solution. And I personally
Yes.
tend to look for the solutions today. I mean, there's always a lot of problems. There's always things coming at you. There's family stuff. There's kid stuff. There's work stuff. And then, but when you look at it and you're like, okay, well, what are we going to do about this now? This thing happened. What do we do
Yeah.
now going forward? And so we stay in the solution, and helps us to really stay out of the mess. So
Yeah.
Hillary,
And
I
it's
thank
in,
you so much for your time. I really
thank
appreciate
you.
it, especially on your day off with your son. Thank you for giving us this time, and I know my audience is going to love this incredible conversation. Where do you
Oh,
like people to reach out to you when
right.
when they want to get a hold of you?
So my website is great, the hillaryphelps.com with one L. There's a link there for email. LinkedIn's, great. And Instagram is great. And I try to respond to everything. Sometimes it might take a couple days, but I respond to every message that comes through. And if I don't have an answer, if I don't have a resource, if I can't help, I'll know someone. I point them in that direction. If they're looking for recovery or if they're looking for, EDMR or like a therapist, like whatever. And I'm like, I don't do this, but this is who I like, or I don't do that, but reach out to this person. I don't do sound bowls in LA, but this girl does. So I
Sure.
built this really wonderful. So those are the best places.
Awesome. I'll make sure I link all that in the
Okay.
show notes below. And again,
Thank you.